Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Way We Grow podcast, a production of the Craft Growers Network. Today, our guest is Drew Mattison. Now, Drew was suggested for the podcast by our last guest, Jarrett Ritchie, and, he was introduced to me as Jarrett's teacher when Jarrett entered the cannabis space, and sort of his sensei and the grow guru that he got all of his information from. And so after hearing that introduction and enjoying my conversation with Jarrett so much, I knew that I had to get Drew on the show. So Drew, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your cannabis journey and, where it all sort of started for you.
Thanks, Nick. It's a pleasure to meet you. Jarrett's a good friend. We've known each other for a couple decades now. Met in Denver a long time ago through a mutual friend in the restaurant business. I think a lot of us in this industry have had some time in the restaurant business at one time or another due to its flexibility and such. I grew up in Florida originally, East Coast, and where the laws and the mindset on cannabis is very different than in the West, where I ended up meeting Jared and so forth and really beginning my cannabis career. It started in Florida growing up, and then I went to college at University of South Florida and graduated there, and I couldn't get out of Florida quick enough. And so back in 1993, I bolted to Denver, met a friend who had escaped Florida a couple of years earlier, and just hit the ground running. Absolutely fell in love with Colorado. The people were probably my favorite part, even though, the mountains and the snow and the snowboarding. I grew up surfing. So snowboarding was a natural segue, but I absolutely fell in love with Colorado. But as I was saying, the people and the mindset of just the kind of live and let live kind of mentality really struck me, and I took a liking to right away. And about a year after I moved to Colorado, I had a friend, my roommate, had a friend visit him from University of Florida. And down in Florida University, there were two hot spots for cannabis back in the day, a long time ago. Really when Kind Bud, when that name really didn't even exist in Florida, it was called Crippy back in the day. That was the name. And it came from Miami, and it quickly came and went to Gainesville, Florida, which is where the University of Florida is, the Gators. And those two places seem to be the epicenter of high-grade, quality homegrown cannabis in Florida for quite a while. And I was lucky enough, as I said, when I moved to Colorado, to have a friend come out from UF who had a little bit of cannabis cultivation experience, and he had some amazing genetics for back then. It was very hard to come by Kind Bud, Crippy, just really good, dank, seedless Sensimilla back then, and this is one of the few guys that had it, and I was very impressed by what he had, and I was intrigued, and I picked his brain, and unfortunately he was, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this in this industry, is that some people are very forthcoming with information, and some people hold it tight to their chest, and I don't know if it's pride or ego or just their own hard work, and they don't want to give it away, and that's understandable. And but he was one of those that kept it close, and so I began my cannabis journey kind of figuring things out on my own and learning the hard way, making many mistakes. As a matter of fact, almost all the things I have taught people over the years have been because I've screwed them up, learned the hard way, and will never forget those lessons. So sometimes those are the best things, and so I started growing in Colorado in about 1994, just about a year after moving out there. And it all began in a little closet in an apartment complex off of 6th Avenue West, right by Red Rocks Amphitheater, which is where I lived for a while. So it all started there in a little apartment with a 400-watt metal halide, a Hydrofarm ebb and flow, one of those orange plastic ones they used to make a long time ago, all a kit ready to go right in the box. You just take it out of the box, get it set up, and we had some seeds from a couple of bags that we got on the black market. Of course, everything was black market back in the mid-'90s, and I just had a couple of seeds that we were lucky enough to find, and popped them, and they germinated and got a few ounces of incredibly good incredibly good cannabis my first time around. I was quite lucky.
Nice.
So it started there, and I went from one project to the next, all personal projects. I didn't really get into commercial growing for maybe about 5 years. After that, I've been a connoisseur, and so it's just been more of a personal project, taking care of my own health. I do have chronic back issues, and so that's been a very good thing for me to get into it, producing it for myself so that I can take care of my back and help me sleep a little better, because that's my main thing, is I don't sleep very well. So cannabis helps me significantly at night, especially the heavier indica-dominant strains, high myrcene, terpene strains help me significantly when it comes to sleep. So that's
Nice.
how I got my start in Colorado in the mid-'90s, and then graduated from place to place. I'd rent a house, talk with the landlord, examine the basement, determine if it was worthy or not, and put some time and money into it, and usually have it for 1, hopefully 2 years, instead of having to bounce from year to year. It gets costly, and it's kind of a pain in the butt after all the setup to have to bounce. So basements was my thing for quite a while.
I feel like basements were the thing for a lot of people for quite a while, because, I always see the old pictures of people trying to do it in their attic. And if you're in a place like Colorado, that becomes a problem in the winter when you're the only house on the block without snow on the roof. And so, I've seen
Indeed.
like a lot of people kind of trend towards the basements in that time, and especially in colder areas, you have a more your temperatures won't fluctuate as much. You'll have a little bit better control, especially considering the different controls you had access to in the 90s are far different than what we have access to today. And, you were having to MacGyver a lot of things to make sure that it worked properly. What were some of those first experiences?
Indeed.
Yeah. What were some of those first experiences like when you were growing?
Well, it's interesting you bring up the climate issue, and that's one of the biggest things we deal with, and that's why we're so blessed for the growers, lucky enough to grow in Colorado. We have some very nice weather, and it's very conducive of growing and cultivation. In a grow, your parameters are very important. Humidity and temperature being two of the most important. And Colorado, we're blessed with incredibly low humidity. And, plants do, with vapor pressure, et cetera, they do enjoy a certain amount of humidity for maximum growth, et cetera, et cetera. However, very quickly can you go too far and create too much humidity, and all of a sudden you're dealing with major issues, mold, bud rot, all sorts of other issues that you have to, whether it's spraying to mitigate, and it just opens up a whole can of worms. And so Colorado is a beautiful place to grow because of that lack of humidity, squashes that potential for the mold and mildew. Now, of course, things can still grow and fester, but it's just a great head start we have in Colorado. Also, just the climate being cool. Almost every night, my first 15 years of growing, I didn't use air conditioning once. I didn't
Wow.
need air conditioning one time. I specialized in growing up in the mountains, up in the foothills. Evergreen was an area that I enjoyed growing very much. We have about an elevation of 7,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level. So every night of the year, even when it's 95 degrees, even 100 degrees in Denver, it'll be 68 degrees at night in Evergreen. Even Denver will be in the low 70s on a very, very hot day. And when you're pumping dry air at 72 degrees into a grow, that's even, and that's the warmest it gets. In those summer months at night, it's very conducive of healthy plant vigor. And so I was very lucky to have that.
Were you running your plants, the lights at night then, so that you could kind of offset those day temperatures? All right, yeah, that's it.
Indeed. Indeed.
It's
For
still something
multiple-
that's super suggested to a bunch of growers. It's something that I feel like a lot of people miss, that one key point of it. It works good in the summer and in the winter because you have that ability to heat or cool more efficiently.
Absolutely. And another thing to consider too is the electrical, the tiered service of electrical service provided. IREA, XL Energy, whomever it happens to be, always charge less money at night for those less in-demand hours. And so that's also another benefit of being able to grow, or using your 12 and 12 cycle to be on at night. It's cheaper as well. So, but yeah, between the temperature and the price, it's a no-brainer to pretty much put that 12 hours on at night, every night. And so, yeah,
For sure.
Colorado just did me so right early on. Like I said, I was able to skip the charge of the air conditioning, and then of course the costly maintenance, and then the purchases of the air conditioning and installation and all that, and getting the HVAC guy down in your basement, and all those things we've had to deal with. Having people in our grows or in our areas, or in our sensitive areas. So it's been very, very nice. Just pumping air in, pumping air out. I had things on, temp stats, and so the temperature would get at a certain degree, get maybe above, let's say 84 degrees. Boom, fan cuts on. I've got some massive, 700, 800, 900 CFM fans, pumping air in and pumping air out at the same time. Obviously with carbon filters. Back in the day when things were on the DL and underground, I had some inline ozone generators that were also used in conjunction with the carbon filters that seemed to scrub the air, even getting what the carbon filters missed. So it was quite an
Wow.
effective scrubbing process because of all that air I had to pump out of my house in lieu of the air conditioners. So,
For sure.
but it's quite effective.
That's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you were already thinking early on about, the environmental needs of the plants, and making sure that you were also targeting a low cost. So you were very budget minded, which I feel like is something that is so important. And you can't just look at, necessarily buying the perfect equipment to make everything run as smoothly as possible. And sometimes you really need to look at it as like a cost benefit analysis, and see how much you actually can spend feasibly and what you can get with that price. And air exchange in a room, while not necessarily ideal for some of the things that you mentioned you were controlling for, with like the ozone and the carbon filters for molds and pests and pathogens, you have those in mind, and you have that as part of like your SOP already, which is such an important thing to do. And since you were like kind of already geared towards really tuning in to what you had the capability of achieving, what were some of those initial harvests like? Did you kind of hit the ground running and start to see success right off the bat, or did you have a few large failures? I know you kind of mentioned earlier that you learn from failures, as we all do, but what were some of those early on successes and some of those early on failures that taught you some lessons?
Absolutely. Well, luckily, I hit the ground running with a successful little 3 ounce or so harvest with my first harvest in the closet, in the one apartment complex where I started on my adventure. I was so pleased and so amazed. And, I grew up gardening, first of all. So I grew up in the Southeast, as I said, in Florida. I was also in Atlanta for a handful of years, which is where my father stayed. And I would go visit him, and he always had a wicked garden in the backyard. I was always, helping him pick, helping him plant, helping him weed, all those good things. And I love just like, and I wouldn't see it every day. So every 3-4 days I'd go out in the garden. I'm like, oh my God, that pepper is twice the size as it was. It just blew me away. Just nature blew me away. So extending this over into the cannabis realm was just a natural geeky thing for me to do, and just enjoy watching it grow. And cannabis explodes. Like, just every day you see a difference with cannabis, and how it's affected by your stimuli, the environment that you create. And so, so I was quite successful at the very beginning. As I said, because I didn't read it in a book, we didn't have the freaking internet back then. I wasn't able to just press a key and see how somebody else is doing it down the road or on the other side of the country or whatever. And so, my cloning, for instance, my first cloning. My first foray was with seeds, as I said, and they popped and germinated, and they worked quite well. Got rid of the males. The females worked. I got the 3 ounces from it. But soon thereafter, I tried some cloning, and I didn't have any direction. And I took clones. I took leaves as clones. Like, I took did the 45-degree angle, dipped it into the solution, and they wouldn't root because they were leaves. They weren't branches. And so I just didn't know anything back then. So the leaves failed, and then I tried bigger pieces, and that happened to have branches, and hey, those worked. And I just figured that out on my own. And back then I'm using some cheap powderized hormone that you got from the garden store. They didn't have Clonex. They didn't have, Growtech or any of these better brands of the gels. And so quite a bit of failure back then. So once the cloning thing started working, I had some more and more success. But, one of my first grows was in Evergreen, Colorado. And it gets cold at night, as you alluded to earlier in your comment. And even in the garage, I was growing in a garage. Above, I had a kind of like a mother-in-law suite of a big master house up the driveway. And so I was in this guest house, and there's a garage on the bottom and the habitation up above. And I'm growing downstairs, and it's not insulated, and I had to get, and I didn't realize the space heater thing and what the minimum temperature could be without screwing up the plants, and what that would even look like. How do you even recognize if you're screwing up the plants if they're too cold? Well, I learned quickly that they will continue to grow. Let's say they're in the, clearly in the 30s, they're going to wilt and die. But let's say they're in the low 40s or mid 40s or higher. They're going to still grow. They're going to still look very green and lush. But what's going to happen is that the internodal space is going to stay, they're not going to fill in the gaps on the colas. So your little nodes are going to be spread out like they are at the very beginning of growth, maybe around the third, fourth week when they start to really flower. But what they do is they just don't end up filling in. You don't end up getting colas. So you have these beautiful plants with hella crystals, hella trichomes everywhere, because the cold actually brings out the trichomes, as we know, the cold temperatures at night. But you have these little nugs everywhere, and they don't add up, and they don't look that great, and they end up being covered in trikes, but just little popcorn buds. So I've had multiple sessions with temperatures too cold, not realizing that until I figured that out, and bringing the temperature up. In my opinion, I like the temperatures not to get down below 60. I like the low 60s, maybe 63, get that really frosty look going, but not hurt the plant and not ruin that potential of those big fat colas growing. So I like to keep my temperatures between about 63, 64 at the very, very coldest, and right around maybe the mid 80s to low 80s. Some people talk about the high 70s and the very low 80s. I personally like the metabolic absorption of the water, of the nutrient, in that mid 80s, mid to low 80s. I don't like higher than 80s because funk starts forming in the reservoirs, etc. But I really do like those low 80s. It seems like the plants are very vigorous and they grow quite well in that kind of range. And so yes, and then on the opposite side, temperature's getting too hot. Back in the day, we're growing with 1,000-watt metal halide lights. Hortolux was the cream of the crop bulb. Those things have like the most hot centers ever. Like if you see them on a thermal scan, it's just like molten lava in the center by the bulb, and then going out from there, it's exponentially cooler. And so you have these crazy hot spots, and so the trichomes are much less around the hot spot. The hairs, the actual pistils of the flower of the buds are much smaller too, and those are thwarted as well. And so getting too hot is a big deal. And then I started adding fans right under the lights to push cooler air between the light and the top of the bud, and that helped a lot. And that's before air-cooled lights, and that was a big deal when air-cooled lights came in, because then we didn't have to have those fans. But then we figured out the glass was cutting out some of that energy that the plants wanted, so we soon got rid of the air-cooled lights and moved toward to just heavy air conditioning and so forth in these larger grows that we've been doing. So lots of failure with just temperature. Humidity's been huge failures as well, frankly. As I said earlier, plants love a decent humidity up until a certain point where they start growing mold and then bud rot. And so... And I don't like spraying a bunch of stuff, even organic stuff. I'd rather not spray it. So the best thing to do is just keep those parameters, keep the humidity, in my opinion, in the low 50s is perfect. Because then you get that vapor pressure, you get the maximum maximum absorption of nutrient, maximum growth, without the chance of mold and mildew happening all over your bud. So just keeping those parameters in check seems to minimize those problems. And so temperature and humidity were big problems with my early grows.
For sure. And you have such a different nutrient assimilation rate of assimilation when you're under these high intensity discharge lights, because they do push off so much heat down right onto the canopy that adjusting for that heat and the leaf surface temperature can be a little harder than what growers are experiencing now with LED lights, where they actually need to maintain a much higher temperature and much higher humidity for maximum transpiration rates within the same
Indeed.
grow spaces that had maybe a 1-to-1 fixture replacement, where they had HIDs and now they're on to LEDs, and boom, they have to completely change their environmental parameters to still achieve the same high quality product. So when you were
Absolutely.
when you were growing all these different methods, what were some of the biggest innovations that you saw? I mean, you mentioned air-cooled ballasts, which was huge for HID growers. And I know that Jarrett mentioned to me that you owned a grow shop at one point, so you must have encountered numerous innovations throughout your career in both growing as well as retailing these different products. What were some of the ones that you look back at now with like a really fond memory of being just the most cutting edge thing that you had seen at that time? And maybe give me like the top three things that you witnessed.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to say, one of the first things I saw, I saw a lot of different technologies come out as far as the type of hydroponics, because hydroponics is fun. It's engineering. So much of the hydroponic industry is engineering, from the lighting to the actual plumbing, and pressurized water systems, spray systems, aeroponics, aquaponics. So one of the most interesting things I saw early on was there was a guy named Gordon Creaser, and he's a really popular Australian hydroponic grower that is an innovator from probably almost 50 years ago at this point. He was early hydroponics, but he did aquaponics with fish, and it was incredible. And I got to go to his house in Orlando probably about 30 years ago, right during my first couple of years of growing. And he had his whole garage with an aquarium and an entire self-sustained fish aquaponics setup, and it blew my mind. And back then I was just doing top drip with rock wool, and top drip's still my favorite even today. But I was just getting started, and going in this guy's garage and seeing no nutrient, no anything, and not even pH, just the fish keeping everything in a homeostasis situation just blew my mind. And so, to me, that was the first thing that was revolutionary and different, and I know that's still being done today, aquaponics all across the world for sustainability, etc. The next thing that really blew my mind was probably the lighting thing. The LED thing is absolutely revolutionary. Going from just the same old for really a few decades with the HID lighting, whether it was metal halide for the veg cycle and high pressure sodium for the bloom cycle, but just to have this LED, and essentially kind of the same LED can be used for veg and bloom, which kind of blew us away as well. We do have some specific spectrums that go back and forth between grow and bloom, but in general, a lot of people use the same light for veg and bloom and do quite well. But literally double the amount of lumens, double the amount of par watts going out, with half the amount of energy being consumed and less than half the amount of heat was absolutely revolutionary, especially for home growers. Commercial systems are different. You can get away with mass air conditioning units, et cetera. And yes, it costs money to run, but you can get it done. But with some home systems, you can't even do it. It's a non-starter for a lot of guys, whether in the bedroom or a basement or whatever, or in a closet like where I started. And so having access to LEDs just opened the door for so many more people to be able to tap in, use their facility, use their home to be able to grow, maximize, grow their own medicine. And so and then just better quality product, less airy buds that didn't get the burn, like I was saying, with those hot spots that were created so often with the HID lighting. And so the quality went up, the cost went down, and I think more and more people just entered the market and started growing for themselves because it was just easier to do and less money to do it. And so I think the lighting was a huge part of it as well. And thirdly, I think these climate control systems are badass, man. I remember 20 years ago dreaming and wishing that I had engineer friends that could have developed a Rockwool or a media sensing hygrometer with a probe that could sense if if the pump broke, your Rockwool, your plant, because in Rockwool you don't have much of a buffer. If your system goes down 24 hours, you're going to be dead. Your plants are going to be dead. And so if you had some sort of sensor, and of course we have smartphones now and we have all of this present today, which is a beautiful thing, but I would have died for this 20 years ago. I get a little message on my phone saying, hey, I'm sensing 10% humidity in your Rockwool cube, whereas it should be 20% or more. You clearly have a problem. I'd race home, fix my pump or my dripper got clogged or something, and problem solved. I can't tell you how many times I walked into a room, and even before looking, I could smell rot. I could smell the rot. And so if anything is different, every time you're walking down the stairs and going into your grow room, if anything is different from the smell, the sound is different, something is wrong and you're bracing yourself. And so the smell of a little rot or something different, even for 24 hours, I go down, it's like, okay, my plants are dying because they got too much water, they didn't get enough water, something's going on. All of these automated systems are just absolutely amazing today that can let you know on your phone. You can, on your app, you can turn on an exhaust fan, you can turn off an exhaust fan, you can turn on water, you can adjust pH with these doser systems. So to me, these automated systems that aren't just for these big commercial box places, but for, Joe in his basement, are just really badass and fun to use, fun to dial in. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, we're hobbyists, but we're also little engineers ourselves. There are not many people that are growing that don't know how to use their brains and their hands to fix things, because things happen and the grow store is not always open down the road, and you need to make something happen right now at 11 o'clock at night when you discovered it, and you need to fix the problem right then and there. So I think every grower has a little bit of engineering inside them, whether they admit it or not.
For sure. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, there is so much more peace of mind when you do have the ability to monitor your grow from a distance. But it also then, it's almost a double-edged sword sometime, because, maybe there was a little bit of ignorance is bliss at times. It always sucks walking into a room when you start to smell that rot smell, where leaves have wilted and are not coming back. And it's just that it's a very obvious smell. You said it, and I like had a fucking reaction to that to that thought, because I'm like, oh, I fucking smell it right now. But
Totally.
if you have the ability to monitor it, then when you do see a problem, and if you're the only person that can go and fix it, you're almost obligated to, because if you don't, then you can't blame anything else besides yourself or your own lazy ass, whereas before you might have just been like, well, I check on it twice a day. If it's not within my checks, I don't know what else to do.
Yep.
I can't go out there every 15 minutes. So yeah, I do love monitoring, though, because it also helps with a lot of these newer technologies, or techniques, I should say, such as like crop steering, which isn't new. It's just new for cannabis. But, people in tomato and cucumber industries have been using crop steering techniques for decades successfully as well. And being able to produce that much more produce off of each plant. So let's see. So, you said that your father was sort of your start into gardening in general. What were some of the first plants that you remember growing that you were like really excited about, that maybe sort of excited your senses to where you really wanted to follow this this path that you've taken with plants? And then you said you also went to university, and I was wondering, does your degree happen to play into your love of plants?
Good questions. My dad started me off. He was always a gardener. He's actually a landscape architect. So he was worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and he would design wildlife refuges across the southeast of the country. U.S.
Wow.
wildlife refuges, like 100-acre, 200-acre refuges, where the visitor center would be, where like in a swamp, the Okefenokee Swamp in North Florida, South Georgia area. He designed that whole refuge, and where everything went, the bathrooms and where the swamp would go, and the boat launches would be, and just everything, and where the plants. He knew every plant, what every plant was, every tree was. He could identify. So I had a little bit of that in me, and like I said, in Atlanta we always had the garden. And honestly, my favorite plants were tomatoes and beans. And I think because I got the satisfaction. I'm not a very patient person, and I wasn't a very patient kid. And so being able to see something every day grow and change blew me away, and it kept me going. If it took weeks for things to happen, it's a little harder for me to stay involved and stay chomping at the bit. But watching a tomato grow every day, coming from a little flower to a little ball of fruit, and just grow literally every day, and see that. And the same thing with a bean. And beans were really cool to me because, as a little kid, because they would follow a string up or a pole up, and every day it's like another 6 inches, and I'm like, oh my God, and then eating the our fruits of our labor, literally. That was awesome. We would cook and eat the vegetables in our garden, on a weekly basis. We'd harvest, then cook them the next week. Sometimes we'd can and preserve them as well. And so just all of that, all the way from farm to in my belly, was neat seeing that whole cycle. And then expanding on that in cannabis later in my life and being able to grow my own medicine. And as I said, I've had it started recreationally with me with cannabis because of just absolutely loving the plant, loving the effect on me, in college, et cetera, in late high school, which was pretty much where I started. But it soon happened after I hurt my back in my mid to late 20s to where cannabis was a lifesaver as far as a medicine for me. And so the ability to produce my own chemical-free organic medicine that I know has zero anything bad on it, and then consume that cannabis, both eating it and mostly smoking it. The edibles aren't quite as effective for me. They're very effective for others. They don't work quite as well for me. So consuming it, smoking it, or vaping is best for me for sure. But being able to follow that all the way from where I germinate the seed or take the cutting from a host plant, growing it, curing it, smoking it, and feeling better from it. It's pretty cathartic. It's a pretty neat circle of life right there. And so that was a real treat, learning that as a child through eating the benefits of our labor to smoking and consuming and having a medicine that is a benefit of my own labor as well. It was a huge treat throughout my life.
Yeah. It's no wonder that, farming popped up in multiple different cultures around the world. It makes a lot of sense. So going on to then, did you kind of pursue any path in horticulture or botany or anything like that when you went into college? Or what was your path there?
So in college, I was one of those lost kids, frankly, in school. Most of my friends knew what they wanted to be when they grew up, knew where they were heading. I liked gardening, loved it, but I wasn't hyper passionate about anything in particular. And so I've been searching most of my life for that thing to just jump into that just was just a green light and everything pointed me in that direction. And frankly, nothing did that for me. I ended up just kind of falling into a few places and then just very much enjoying and feeling incredibly lucky and blessed where I fell. And so in school, I was a liberal arts major. I was a very rounded major. I got a bachelor's of arts in liberal arts and specializing in philosophy. And so, I will talk to you all day and argue with you all day. But nothing specific about the horticulture back in school. And like I said, when I just kind of fit into it when I came out to Colorado and then had that friend visit, the friend of the friend, and showed me this amazing bud that he grew. And that just started it in my own mind of, hey, if this guy can do it, I think I could do it. It was nothing against the guy. He was a great kid, but I felt like I could do it at least as good as he did. And I'm glad, that introduction happened, because without that, I may have never tried to cultivate. I may have never understood how amazing this medicine even was in the first place. And so, yes, even though educationally I didn't get anything directly from it, I ended up working and finding my way through, my mid to late 20s and just falling in love with the plant, realizing how much it does for me mentally and physically. And then just no matter where I'm at in life, finding a place in my home to grow my own medicine. And I've been lucky to where I've only bought a very little amount of the cannabis over the years in my entire life. And I'm a 53-year-old man right now. And I've only bought, a handful of bags of cannabis in my whole life because of my ability to produce for myself in Colorado. And one more thing I want to say about Colorado, because I can't give Colorado enough props. In California, I have to say as well for that, even though I didn't live there. Colorado was a sanctuary for like-minded people like myself when it comes to cannabis and cannabis rights. Colorado, even though people would get caught and people would get in trouble for cultivating in Colorado because it was federally illegal and illegal statewide as well up until the early mid-2000s, the penalties were much, much less than most of the other states, and it was a known thing. And in even different jurisdictions like Boulder County, I lived in Boulder County, Colorado, in the city of Boulder, much less repercussions if and when you were to get caught with such a thing. And so that was taken into mind and considered as well. And so I can't thank Colorado enough for giving me the opportunity to take some risks, but also know that I wouldn't get, the repercussions weren't nearly as bad as in many other places. So I can't thank Colorado enough for giving me such a safe haven. And so many people from across the country seem to come to Colorado to grow. It was California and Colorado seem to be the big hubs. Of course, Washington and Oregon as well. But I can't give enough props to my home state of Colorado, man, for giving me the opportunity.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was California first with 215, but then Colorado went recreational first, I believe, and kind of blazed the
Yes.
path there. And, there were a lot of issues with that early legalization, and there still are so many issues with legalization in terms of the restraints still put on home grow, even in certain cases, or, how much... like how they regulate it, if it's a plant count or something like that, that's so silly and arbitrary because, if you can only grow 4 plants, then fine, give me 4 5x5 tents and I'll show you how much weed I can grow. And it's just silly things like that don't actually make sense. It just makes sense in the mind of someone who's building these different laws, who's never actually grown a plant themselves. And so I do appreciate like certain
Indeed.
states that have a heavy, heavy number of active individuals towards trying to adjust some of those laws and stuff. Like Michigan, I know, is a big one. California as well, I feel like does kind of help push towards different laws being either re-looked at or reviewed just to make sure that they aren't necessarily causing any sort of issues with just like I said, like home grow. Home grow is one of the big ones for me. But when
Yeah.
you were so when was the first year that you started growing? Remind me of that. Was it 94?
Yes, it was 1994. Yep.
Okay. And do you still grow today? I totally understand if you don't feel comfortable talking about it. But maybe talk about one of your more recent grows that was kind of using whatever you felt as though was like your most advanced setup, I should say. Advanced only meaning like the timeline in which it was grown in.
Nice. Well, yes, I recently moved to Costa Rica. So right now I'm talking to you from Costa Rica. I live in a little town right south of a town called Jaco on the central Pacific coast. So I can surf as much as I can and live a good life. I'm very, very, very lucky. And cannabis has some to do with that as well through my journey, helping me get here. So I'm not growing currently because in Costa Rica right now you can technically grow if you apply through the Ministry of Salud, which is the health ministry, and you apply, and it's a pretty extensive process using a doctor, much more stringent than what we have back home in the U.S. and in Colorado. But you can technically grow up to 6 plants if you go through this process. But it's not a process that I want to deal with right now. I do have some local friends that can help me out with some medicine and then have been able to at this point. And so it's not one of those things I just really want to jump through those hoops at this point. Just like I did back in the States there years ago, I'm keeping an eye on it and seeing where it goes. And the easier it gets and closer to recreational, because they are heading in that direction as well, which is beautiful. And as soon as they do that, I'm sure I'll jump in with a little home grow myself once it's 100% legal. But right now, they don't mess around with... Right now, they kind of lump it in with other drugs, and it's just very unfair. You getting caught, that being said, you getting caught with a little bit of marijuana, even being a gringo like myself, an American, no big deal at all. They just don't want you selling, don't want you growing, providing, transporting, anything like that. So the last grow I set up was a friend's grow in a basement in a very beautiful concrete, unfinished basement, which is my favorite place to grow as far as home grow. And 9-foot ceilings, unfinished. I had him install a mini split, a 3-ton mini split system, which is a very nice, robust system producing a shit ton of cooling. And I also had a commercial dehumidification system set up, all on stats, so that humidity gets too high, the dehumidifier turns on. Same thing with the temperature gets too high, the AC turns on, turns off when needed. So it was complete climate control. I had a tank-based CO2 system installed as well. I had minimum exhaust. I had a negative pressure installed so that at the front door of the house you didn't smell any smell coming out, any weed smell. Even though it's technically legal with the plant count that they have going, they still want to be incognito because of the neighborhood they live in, which is understandable. So I always usually recommend between 300 and 600 CFM going out of the house through a filter at all times so that you have that negative pressure at the front door and at windows and throughout the house. And so climate control was completely dialed. It was a top drip Rockwell slab system. I worked with cocoa for quite a while. I switched from back maybe about 10 years ago from Rockwell slab top drip to a cocoa system in a 10-gallon cocoa mixed with 70-30 cocoa to perlite mix. And I switched to the cocoa about 10 to 12 years ago when the russet mite infestation happened in Colorado. And everybody who's grown in Colorado can remember the tragedy that was the russet mites coming and taking over Colorado for a couple of years. Worst part about it is no one really knew what it was. And so a lot of us were festering around, just freaking out, seeing these effects on our plants and not having any idea what it was. And only some elite people from California knew what it was because they had been dealing with it for quite a while. So all the interstate commerce, which was a great thing when it came to spreading love and spreading genetics, unfortunately also spread some really hardcore bad pathogens, including those russet mites, which to me, to this day, are the worst pathogen I have ever dealt with in the cannabis world. I've been able to take care of them, and I know how to essentially get rid of them now and to control them now, and I use sulfur, mainly sprayed sulfur as opposed to the sulfur vapor, because the vapor I've killed plants too many times with it just getting a little too caustic, a little too dense as far as the vapor, and the sprayable sulfur seems to work very, very good at about 1.5 teaspoons per gallon of water used. And it works quite well for the russet mites and honestly for the potential fungus, mold, anything like that at the same time. So kind of kills a few birds with one stone. So, but the russet mites were a huge issue back in the day. I think I just lost my train of thought where I was going with that.
No worries at all. I feel like that's such an important thing to bring up is the simplicity of using wettable sulfur to take care of russet mites, because russet mites still are a huge problem, and I've had to deal with them a few times. Wettable sulfur always seems to be the best way to go about it. I always like to remind people, though, that if they're using oils or mineral oils or essential oils in any of their other sprays or IPM practices, to make sure that you either give the plants a really, really good wash with some sort of surfactant, like even just dish soap or something like Capsil, like an adjuvant, where you can really get all of that extra oil residue off the plant before you hit them with sulfur, because you will melt your plants if you combine oils and sulfurs too close together. And it goes the opposite way too. If you need to apply oils afterwards, make sure that you are rinsing the sulfur off of your plant if you just sprayed them for russet mites or other mites, or especially molds or mildews work. Sulfur works really well for those as well. But I also agree, I do not like the sulfur burners or anything like that atomizes the sulfur. It just does seem to cause some issues, and it doesn't go away after, the rooms just end up starting to smell like sulfur after a while, and that it doesn't go away. But I
Big
think
time.
we were. So
I'm
what
glad
we
you
were
brought
talking.
that point up, by the way, Nick, about the oils. Yeah, that's a very, very good point to bring up for people listening. Sulfur is incredibly effective. However, with the oil, it's like a toxic solution. And let me tell you another toxic solution. If you have humidity going, if you're running a humidifier, you never, ever, ever want to run sulfur, spray sulfur, or use a sulfur burner, because the sulfur will turn into an acid rain, literally an acid rain, and melt your plants even worse than spraying. So mixing sulfur and oils is a horrible thing, and mixing sulfur in a humidifier is also a horrible thing. And then thirdly, applying, just like when you're applying anything to plants, whether it's a good oil, beneficial oil, or it is sulfur itself, you want to spray when those lights are off, because when the stomatas are closed, you can burn the shit out of your plants when the sulfur. Now you can spray even a half an hour before the lights turn on, as long as they're dry. As long as the plants are dry by the time the lights turn on. So that's another thing I'd like to point out, so people don't fry their plants as well. It's just to pop on a little green light or something and spray the shit out of your plants and then while they're dark, let them dry before those lights come on. Come on.
Yes, absolutely. And, so what we were talking about before was the last grow that you had set up. And I think
Right.
we just got a little bit onto a russet mite tangent because it's a good tangent to get onto.
Yes.
It's one of those pests. You say it's the worst that you've ever dealt with, and I agree. It is up there. It's probably my number two, my number one being root aphids. But russet mites are definitely
Winged
just
root
like,
aphids. Oh.
oh. And for anybody out there that is wondering if they're dealing with root aphids, my best advice is to know the difference between winged root aphids and fungus gnats. Is fungus gnats' wings lay flat on their back, root aphids stand up like the wings are preying on their back. So those are easy things to look out for. So if you are dealing with something like
Good
that,
differentiator, Nick. That's a really good point.
yep,
One other thing I would point out: winged root aphids fly into light. Fungus gnats fly indiscriminately. And
yep,
that to me, that was my easiest way. And they're a little bigger too. The winged root aphids are a little bigger. You can see their wing structure better, like you just said. That was a brilliant point. But if you just watch for a second, the winged root aphids will find their way and make their way and die. And that's another way you can tell you have them. You have dead bugs on the top of your top leaves of your plants. Why? Because the winged root aphids are searching out that light. They hit your light. Well, not an LED. Excuse me. Let me back up. Back when I was growing with a high pressure sodium, the
okay,
winged root aphid would go up, hit the light, die, fall onto the top of the plant, and now on the top of the plant I have tens, if not dozens, of dead. What are these bugs? They're winged root aphids because they're flying to the light. Fungus gnats will never fly to the light. They're just flying all over the place, just looking for a place to breed. So that was another way of being able to differentiate the two.
for sure.
But yes, I hate those things, man. Let me ask you, Nick, what was your, because clearly you need like a drench to deal with winged root aphids because they're feeding off of your roots.
Yep.
What was the best way that you used to clear those things?
Pyrethrins and Bavaria bassiana. And now Botanigard
Nice.
actually has the product
Beneficials.
Botanigard Max, which is pyrethrins and Bavaria bassiana mixed together in an aqueous solution. So it's super easy to mix up in a spray applicator if you're going to do like a sprench, where you're actually using like a sprayer like you would for your foliar applications, but you're just kind of hitting the top of the pots. And
Yep.
it's also why I suggest always using solid plastic pots, because if you're using a fabric pot, root aphids they're usually permeable enough where root aphids can enter and exit the that mesh bag or that fabric pot. But yeah,
Wow.
pyrethrins and Bavaria bassiana work for me.
Very nice. You know what also I want to throw in there when it comes to the root aphids thing, or the, the russet mites thing? I had incredibly good results with beneficial insects as well. And
Really?
some people don't like spraying anything on their plants, and I had incredible results from Arbico Organics, and there was another one that's like a little cheaper. They're online, the top 3 hits on Google for beneficial insects though, but predatory mites. Predatory mites, Californicus, Swirsky, and Andersoni. Those are the 3 Latin names of the beneficial mites that kick ass on russet mites, curcumin mites, all the most evil mites that you can get. The beneficial mites were incredibly effective. And the best way was a two-part treatment. What I would do is I would spray a little bit of water as kind of a surfactant so that the things that the bugs that I would sprinkle on them would stick to the leaves better. So I would spray with a little backpack sprayer, some pH balanced water. Then the first thing I'd do is I would shake the ready-to-use bugs that were just like ready, just chomping at the bit to eat. Shake those immediately on my garden. And then at the same time, they have these they're called sachets, which are like these little packets of bugs that have bugs of all stages inside of them. So they continue to breed inside the bag and to go out the little holes that they have in the little sachets, and they'll go out on their own, search out the bugs, come back to their little nests inside the sachets, and have a little environment for 2, 3, even 4 weeks. They'll stay alive. And so I would have the ready to use that would knock them down immediately within the first day or two. And I literally 24 hours later see my plants look healthier. 24 hours later, it was incredible. And then throughout the next week, as those sachets are starting to do their thing, have better and better and better benefits, or better recovery of these plants that were damaged from the russet mites every single day from those sachets. So I really recommend it. It's a little money. You're going to drop a little money on these, but 100% organic. They don't hurt anything else in your garden, and they just really go and attack what they need to attack, which is those russet mites. And I can't speak highly enough of those beneficial predator mites.
Nice. Yeah, I've used predator mites before for things like fungus gnats, but and we've used them as well for like 2-spot spider mites and whatnot. I've never used them for russet mites, but I'm glad to hear that they've worked for other people in that, especially for those people out there, giving them an option if they are trying to avoid spraying. Especially, after you get past week,
Very
3, maybe
effective,
4 at the latest, you really don't want to be spraying too much at all anymore. And there's some things you just don't want to spray in flower at all. Like you don't want to spray sulfur at all in flower. If you're in a commercial setting, you're going to pop for sulfur on your plants. No. So it's important to know your limitations there for sure.
Yep. Have you ever tried nematodes for the fungus gnats?
Oh,
Dude,
yeah.
Destroys
Nematodes.
them. I had the best results with the nematodes. Yep.
Absolutely. We've been using these new one from I think it's called like Sierra Naturals is the company that makes the nematodes that we've been getting, and they've been coming in on these little tiny sponges rather than in the cake form, and they work great. You just pop them into your mixing tank with your aerating stone and your circulating pump, and you're off to the races. If you are using nematodes though, just remember to apply them through a diaphragm pump. Don't apply them through any sort of siphon pump or anything like that, because the pressure that builds up in the system, as well as the like chopping action of the actual motor, can cause the nematodes to be destroyed, because they are little tiny living. They look like little worms. If you need to have a reference, look back to that episode of SpongeBob SquarePants that has the nematodes eating everything in the ocean. They look just like that, but they're tiny. So.
You know what I did, Nick, to get around that, though, because of the pump thing, and it seems like they're even more effective because they don't want to live underwater. They need a little bit of air. And so what I would do is I would mix them up in a 5-gallon bucket, like heavy concentration, like 10 million or whatever the count was. It was a heavy. And I would just hand water the top of every one of my plants that had the that had the fungus gnat infestation, and so just hand top that. And so I would never even add them to my reservoir. I would just add this mega high concentration of nematodes to the top of every one of my plants. And being in Colorado, my plant count was always in the tens as opposed to hundreds, so it was feasible to do 20 plants top dress like that, and that was incredibly effective.
For sure. And you do only need to soak the top inch or 2 of any pot size, because that's the depth at which the nemat or the fungus gnat larvae are actually living. They're not going to be much deeper into the pot.
Sure.
So I think those are all great tips for people that are battling a few different pests. We don't actually get into pest control too often here, but I feel like it is really important, and so I'm really glad that you brought it up. Just with the russet mite thread of thought, I thought that was great. Can you talk a little bit about transitioning from being a home grower into your time spent in the retail space for different grow equipment and stuff?
Absolutely. I did my transition was kind of twofold. It was from the home grow underground cannabis cultivation to number one, commercial cultivation, because I got into commercial cultivation. I set up a grow in a part of Boulder. It's called Gun Barrel. It's kind of a little. It's still in Boulder City, but it's on the outskirts of Boulder, and it's where a little mini warehouse zone is. And so this is one of the first places Boulder City allowed and zoned for, back when the laws passed, zoned for commercial cultivation of cannabis. And in Gun Barrel, I was the first warehouse that opened up there, my little warehouse, with a friend. And it was just back in the day where you had a notebook of caregivers, or I was a caregiver for a notebook of patients and of people that needed care and needed medicine, and were able to legally buy it from me, and I was able to legally sell it to them, but I had to have a notebook filled with their kind of license paperwork and stuff showing the state. And that was my first commercial grow there, and it was about a 50 light operation with like 18-foot high ceilings. I brought in a 10-ton HVAC unit, which blew me away because, you know, my house at the time had a 3-ton, so this was like, wow, this is so big and cool, and it was just so groundbreaking. You know, we didn't have electricians that were used to hooking up lights like this yet and running this much conduit, and we didn't have plumbers that were, you know, willing to do the jobs needed for the water, and it was just really groundbreaking, and it was hard finding subs and finding engineers, honestly, as well, to figure out BTUs of heat created from each light, and depending on what light technology it was, et cetera, et cetera. So my first foray was into the growing commercial side of it, which I absolutely loved. And I ended up working for myself, like I said at the beginning, and then a commercial dispensary called Sweet Leaf Compassion Center, and I was the head grower for that for a year, until it was found out through the local jurisdiction that it was about 25 feet too close to a school and had to be shut down.
No. Oh, no.
You know, just some of those ridiculous laws. But so that gave me a bad taste for the commercial side of the growing, and so I got out of that at the time. And a little actually before that, though, I got into the side of retail hydroponics and opened a store with a friend in Asheville, North Carolina, and that was quite a while back. That was actually in 19. Let's see, that was right around 1999. Yeah, so maybe about 5 years or so after I started growing, I opened this little grow store in Asheville. And Asheville was kind of like a Boulder of the East Coast. It was an epicenter where growers and like-minded people came to help each other out, to be a community, to know they're safe, know that the laws for getting caught wouldn't put you in jail for 20 years. You still get in trouble. It is North Carolina, but it's a different kind of feel in North Carolina being Asheville. So my store was called Asheville Agricultural Systems, and it opened up in 1999, right around 2000. And just about 2 years ago, we sold it in addition with 4 other stores that we had opened subsequently. So we had 5 stores in total throughout North Carolina, and one in Virginia as well, in Charlottesville. And we sold those and made some good money, and I was able to buy this house in Costa Rica with my proceeds from the sale of that. And
nice.
So that was pretty awesome, taking my, getting into that and learning retail. And I have a little retail experience. My mom owned a little perfume store when I was young and on the main street in my town. So I learned how to do inventory and ordering and customer service and how to greet people and how to restock shelves when, par levels got low, et cetera. And so I took that a little bit of that knowledge with my mama and took it into the hydro store in Asheville, and we're very successful with that store and ended up opening, as I said, 4 more with the help of my brother-in-law and my sister, who did an amazing, amazing job, Ashley and Richard, and just kind of took it over because, I didn't live in North Carolina. I couldn't run the thing. And so they basically helped launch it into the stratosphere and to a place where we could eventually sell it and all make good money. And they're both now retired from it as well, from their hard work. And I'm semi-retired, but not exactly retired. I still run a legal marijuana cannabis business in Denver called Luminescence Labs, going by Denver Dabco, which is a cannabis extraction lab based out of Evergreen, Colorado right now.
Very cool. Is that the entire business? Is they just make concentrates at this point?
Exactly. So that's my current cannabis business is Denver Dab, and we basically are a hydrocarbon extraction lab, and we use butane and propane, mainly butane, different concentrations depending on what consistency we're trying to get at the end. But we do live resins, live batters, we do sugar wax, we do regular wax. We've done cartridges in the past, and we'll probably have some live resin cartridges in the future again. But we're just a concentrate lab, and we sell wholesale to dispensaries across the state of Colorado. And we love what we do. And it's kind of crazy. We produce concentrates all day long, but I still have to say flowers. Flowers still my favorite personally, even though I love and give major props to concentrates and connoisseurs of such. But my personal favorite's still some very good flower, and the whole tactile part of breaking it up and smelling it and experiencing the bud and the plant and the packing it into the bowl or loading a cone or twisting a joint. I very much still enjoy consuming cannabis on a regular basis.
For sure. Yeah, I do as well. I prefer flower over concentrates, although I do love concentrates. But like, it was a weird experience the first time I used a blowtorch to heat up glass to smoke some concentrates. And so now I just use like one of those Puffcos that's like the electric dab rigs basically. But other than that, I enjoy vaporizing my flower because I smoked too many cigarettes when I was younger, and smoking joints now just ends up making me a little bit wheezy. But yeah, flower all the way.
Yes, I very much enjoy it. I do enjoy concentrates from a pen, like you're suggesting as well. It's very nice, especially with you're on a lift, going skiing, snowboarding. You're driving in the car. Well, sitting in a park in a car or something. It's just more handy to have an apparatus like that as opposed to dealing with the flower. So there's a time and a place for all of these methodologies, for sure.
For sure. Let's see. So with it sounds like you were a fan of hydroponics throughout your entire growing career. Did you ever dabble into any sort of like living soil organics or anything like that?
Okay, so that's a good question. I have dabbled, but I have to admit failure when there's failure. So I was not able to be I tried to do the organic soil growing route. Now, living soil hadn't really caught on yet. This was about 10 years ago. And clearly plenty of people were doing living soil. But in the cannabis world, it hadn't really taken hold yet. And there wasn't that much information about it. So I hadn't really been turned on to it, didn't really know of the incredible benefits, of the sustainability of it. It's incredible how sustainable it is. I know people currently that are using the same pots 10, 15 cycles in, just top dressing. It's incredible what they're able to do with this living soil. However, I was not able to figure it out at the time, and like I said, it was 10 years ago when I tried it, and I did more on the just standard organic soil route. And my harvests were decent, but they didn't touch the quality and the quantity, because frankly, I was into the quantity as well. Back in the day, I was making some money, and so I wasn't able to really get the bang that other people that I knew were able to do. And I gave it a few tries. I gave it 4 or 5 cycles worth, and I was happy with the quality and such. I was happy with the cannabis I was consuming from it, but it just didn't make sense in the space I had. I could literally grow about twice as much with my hydro techniques that I had dialed over the years. And so that being the case, I went back to hydro and stayed that way, and have modified with organic top dressings, even with hydro, and played around with a lot of different methodologies within hydro. But the organic thing, I let go because of my inability to be a very good organic grower. So my specialty was in hydro, and I just kind of locked in with that. And when I do enjoy organic bud here and there, and I get it from a couple of friends that are masters at that living soil. And so I do get to indulge as well.
For sure. And I think we are a little bit lucky nowadays to have all these different companies that have these built, amended soilless substrates that are geared exactly towards a full cannabis cycle. You use this many gallons of the soil, you water it, you never let it run off, and you take it all the way from a seedling to harvest in that soil, and you're good to go. Whereas trying to figure it out before, like there were very few products available 10 years ago, like maybe Fox Farm Ocean Forest or something like that you were able to try an organic grow in. But even that, it had different salts in it. It wasn't geared specifically towards cannabis, even though there was a little bit of like, Fox Farm is kind of a cannabis brand. I can understand how it would have been difficult. And even for myself, I've grown organically a few times, but I always come back to synthetic, or not synthetic, but salt-based fertilizers, because it is, you can change everything on a dime. You can adjust on the fly. You don't need to do any sort of soil testing analysis that you might need like a degree in organic chemistry to truly understand, break down, and make a smart, educated
True.
decision on what your next inputs are going to be. And inputs alone, there's the standardization of certain salt-based nutrients, like monopotassium phosphate, calcium nitrate, calcium chloride, all the different sulfates that you can use, molybdenum sulfate,
Yep.
manganese sulfate, all these different things are so standardized. They're so uniform that you can source them from different
Predictable.
areas, and they're predictable, right? Even if some of them have a higher quality than another, with less impurities, less heavy metals, things like that. But that all usually is available through testing. That information is there. But every batch of
Yeah.
fish hydrolysate might be slightly different. Every batch of bat guano or seabird guano, depending on where it comes from, is going to be slightly
Absolutely.
different. So there's consistency with salts that I really like as well.
Indeed.
When you were growing, did you think or did you see that any of your techniques were something that you didn't see other people using, but that you felt were key to your success in the garden?
That's a good question. Sure. There, some. One of the things I use, those plant yo-yos. Have you seen those things that are on
Yeah.
a spring?
I probably got a few
Those
behind me
those
here
were out a
somewhere.
long time before. Right on. So those were out quite. The original ones come from Holland, and they were brilliant. When I first saw them like 30 years ago, I was like, "Wow, this is ingenious." And they were sold for tomatoes, but they weren't taunt enough to hold a tomato, so we knew what they were really meant for. They're made for cannabis for sure, and being from Holland. But I never really saw these in many grows. I saw them at the grow store, and I brought a few in and then started bringing hundreds of them in because they worked so very well. And so that is the one thing that out of all the grows I've had and set people up with, my grows look a little different because instead of stakes, and many people, or trellis, those are the two main, a trellis net, or people staking their plants up and their colas up. This yo-yo system was the system that seemed to differentiate my grows from others. So what I would do is I would take, let's say you had a 4x8 tent, and you've got the posts, the vertical post of the 4x8 tent, going up. I would take a 10 gauge wire that was coated with rubber, like a wire you'd get on a spool at a hardware store, and run that wire around the diameter perimeter of the tent, okay, on the outside of the pole. So it's like a perimeter of wire, like a fence, a wire fence. So I would do one at about 2 feet, 2 feet off the ground, and then one at about 5 feet off the ground, and then one right in the center under where the lights are, like right in the center, okay? And so basically it is a grid, the perimeter of wire around the 4x8 would be where all of those yo-yos would be attached. And so the whole perimeter of the tent on the inside would have hundreds of these yo-yos just strung around, up high and down below. And so, as you know, in cultivation, to maximize your harvest, every place in your tent that has light, you want to have green there. You want to have a leaf, a cola, a part of the plant. You don't want any light hitting the floor, essentially, to have a maximized garden. So these yo-yos, I was able to basically take from early on in my growing, I was able to absolutely maximize every square inch of light that I had in a grow by taking these yo-yos and taking, not because yo-yos and stakes and trellis are used for two reasons. They're used for support so the plants just don't drop down and fall to the floor, and they're also used for straight up manipulation, so you're putting that cola or what have you exactly where you want it to be to maximize its light, or its ability to get light. And so the yo-yos are the same thing. So I'm able to hook the hook around the cola and then look at the canopy and go, okay, that's a perfect spot. That's a spot where light was hitting the floor. Now it's the colas right there. And then I would clip the yo-yo right there onto the wire, and it's set. And it's on a spring, and so as it grows, it doesn't have to be reattached. I don't have to weave it under a trellis again. I don't have to, fix something. It's kind of one and done. I hook it on, and since it's on a spring and it grows, it just keeps growing in that direction, and it's set. So that right there is probably the way I maximize my harvest throughout my career, is because of that manipulation technique. And another thing that's very important, that we kind of talking about the legalization of it or the illegality of it back in the day, is Colorado was one of those states that plant count mattered. It still matters in many ways. 6 plants you're able to grow as recreational user, etc. But count matters. And to what you were saying earlier, you could grow 6 massive plants, and that technically that's totally legal. It's 6 plants. And so I did that as just a person that, I'm not a big fan of jail and getting into trouble, and so I never wanted to even test those waters. And so I always grew the fewest possible plants in a given space as possible. So some people would have like a sea of green and have like 50 plants in a 4x8. In a 4x8, I would have no more than 8 plants. No more than 8 plants. And so it's very important that through that yo-yo technique or what have you, that I maximize every square inch of production space, because I only have 8 plants to deal with. And so it's very important to maximize that. So CO2 is important. The yo-yos and plant manipulation was very important. Clipping leaves every 2 weeks is very, very, very important. Keeping things clean was very important. I was just very anal, because every plant I had was so important to produce, because I only had a select amount of plants, trying to minimize my plant count throughout my career.
For sure. When you say clipping leaves, do you mean like removing the extra fan leaves that are shading out flowering sites, or are you actually going through and cutting off some of those extra sugar leaves or the leaves that are more close to the flowers? I've seen both.
Good question. Primarily fans and mids. And so I never clip sweet leaves. To me, those are too important, and I don't want to shock the plant. I have shocked plants before. Different strains react differently to leaf clippings, and you have to just know that as a grower, or just test it out yourself and figure it out. I grew in my career. AK-47 was the strain that I grew and made most of my money and had most of my success from. And I had the best AK-47 pheno that I had ever seen. I was lucky enough, and some of it's skill, some of it's luck. I had a lot of luck, Nick. Getting that AK pheno from Nederland, Colorado, which was a little grow town outside of Boulder, changed the course of my growing career. It totally set me up. And so different strains react differently to that leaf pulling. And the AK didn't like it very much. So the most I could do with the AK was just a moderate, major fan leaf only, the giant fans. Whereas a lot of the strains today, you can go in and, like, you look at the Jungle Boys, you look at some of these guys, these 3 per guys, 2 per guys, they are stripping, and it's part of their protocol. Every 2 to 3 weeks, they go in, like when they kick into bloom, they strip it completely. 2-3 weeks later, they strip it completely. 2 to 3 later, one more time, and then it's done. I have done some of that. I'm just leery because of my experience with my AK, but absolutely. I don't mess with the sweet leaf, but stripping those, very, very least, stripping the fans significantly helps the end product. The trichome production, that direct sunlight seems to produce more trichomes, and obviously bigger and better swollen colas as well when you got that direct light.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I use the leaf stripping, and as well as like a day 21 prune at the facility that I manage, and we are able to push numbers up really high. I think one of our most recent harvests was my personal best, and it should be just over 3 pounds per 4x4 area. So we were really pushing it as hard as we could, and a leaf strip was definitely required, not only just for the light access to all the flowers and the flowering sites, but also for environmental maintenance and air circulation and all these things that really help promote ripening and bud development. So, you've seen a lot of different aspects of the cultivation space, from home grower to commercial grower to retail shop owner, and not only just doing it in one space and in one community, but seeing the trends across multiple communities, especially coming from that retail sort of that viewpoint. And so, with everything that you have seen change in the industry over the past gosh, 30 plus years. What are some of the things that you think might be changing continuously? Like, where do you see the market or the industry going? As well as what are some of the things that you would like to see change within the industry?
Interesting. Well, you know, trends-wise, some of the things I'm seeing are just a continuing and furthering automation. Like I briefly mentioned before, the sensors that can pick up the humidity in a media, whether it's in your cocoa pot or in your rock wool, and be able to send you an alert on your phone, no matter where you are, and let you know that things are going to die soon because they don't have enough water. That's just brilliant. And I was screaming for that 20 years ago, but we just didn't have the technology back then to produce something like that. But I think that, the margins, the commercial market, which is really pushing most of this, is the commercial market, it's capitalism. And capitalism means the people who own, the owners, want more and more and more. And that's just the way capitalism is. And so, a harvest can be a great harvest, but the next harvest, the capitalist is going to want a little more. And that's just unfortunately the world we live in. And so that being the case, we're in this industry, we're striving for a little more harvest every time, so the technology is going to increase and advance, all in the hopes of getting better quality bud, better quality medicine, but getting more of it per square foot, per watt, per dollar spent by the owners of the businesses. And so these technologies, from humidity sensing to environmental controls that I said earlier, that can be drawn up on your smartphone, and you can turn a fan on, off, manually. Of course, they're going to be on automated settings to turn on and off themselves. But I think these things that are helping people put less actual physical time into it and take that burden off of us and do it automatically, I think are going to continue to be pushed forward in this industry. So a lot more automation. I think, honestly, computers and robots, frankly, are going to continue to push as well and cut people out of the workforce, unfortunately. But whether it's harvesting, I saw some apples being harvested by drones the other day online, and it's only a matter of time before this is automated as well. As anyone who's worked in a commercial grow like yourself, Nick, golly, dude, the trimming. I mean, it's so laborious, but we still don't have badass trimmers yet. They're getting there, and they're getting better, but that kind of automation, I think, is going to save a ridiculous amount of money, increase margins significantly for these companies. And so I see automation, because of in a capitalist society and in us wanting more and more, that's where the demand is going to be, as far as just maximizing every crop that much more. And I think automation is the only way to do that. So I see that as being a huge thing. And conversely, it takes away a lot of what we love about the industry. We love the hands-on part of this. That's what got you, I'm sure, into it. That's what got me into it. It's the hands-on, the watching it every day, and not just looking at my phone and looking at data or looking at a spreadsheet, but getting in there and being part of the garden and part of it and watching it grow every day. And so that makes me a little sad, is that with this amazing automation that we have, we're taking a little bit of the personal aspect out of it. And as you know, the best way to keep a plant healthy is to look at it every day. Like we said, smelling it. You can smell if something's wrong. You can certainly see if something's wrong. You can see a bean popping out or a male flower popping out, because you're in there every day and you're looking at it. If everything's automated and you're not looking as diligently, shit falls through the cracks, man. That powdery mildew pops up and you don't see it until it's 4 days too late, and then everything's got it. And so as much as automation is badass, we still need good master growers and helpers to be in those grows every day, getting down on their knees, clipping those lower leaves, looking at the stalks, looking at the top of the rockle cubes for the winged root aphids, looking for the fungus gnats. That's how we find trouble, that's how we prevent trouble, and that's how we modify and pivot to continually have good gardens, is because of the hands-on aspect and being very involved. And so I'm a little afraid of the automation side taking away of that. But it's tricky, because it brings so much goodness to it, but we don't want too much of it, because we still need to be involved every day to avoid the other pitfalls. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely like two sides of the same coin. And, we use a lot of automation at the facility that I work at, but we we always say that automation is not a replacement for observation. And so you really do need to make sure that you are getting into the grow and confirming with your own eyes what the data is telling you. Don't let the data lead you. Let it confirm what you're seeing. So that is a
Exactly.
huge point. I think that that is very important. Kind of speaking along those same lines of, it's a huge pitfall to allow yourself to only look at the data. And, in some cases now, to be able to keep up with the market trends, it's almost a similar pitfall to not use any data whatsoever. So, in the same sort of line of thought of pitfalls in the industry, what are some of the ones that you are seeing new and old growers face nowadays?
Just different pitfalls.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the same old ones I'm seeing. Whether it's the bugs, the bugs, the disease. The automation is helping these to thwart these things, but they're still there. There's still humidity issues, and it's hard to keep that in check, especially in humid environments. Like, I can't imagine growing in Costa Rica. Like the amount of equipment I would want to install day one before even getting started. The hardcore dehumidification that I never had to really deal with in Colorado. The air conditioning. The scopes that I would look at, because the million kind of bugs that live down here. And so it seems to be a lot of the same pitfalls. It's just we have different tools to work with them now, thankfully. Spider mites, russet mites, and winged root aphids are still the three, in my opinion, biggest pitfalls on the bug side. And then powdery mildew, and then botrytis, bud rot are the two big things on the pathogen side. And then some, funk in the water. But we've got Cleanse now, by Athena, and that chemical that. What is the name of that, Nick? I'm drawing a blank.
Hypochlorous acid. It's
Thank you, hypochlorous,
HOCl.
exactly.
So one
Exactly.
hydrogen, one oxygen, one chlorine atom.
And that seems to have revolutionized many people that I know's gardens right now, because they just added, because a lot of people went to feed to waste because they couldn't deal with that recirculating water and just contaminating their whole garden, because everything was recirculating up until maybe 10 years ago, and then people started getting smart and doing the feed to waste to eliminate that potential. Well, with the Cleanse, with this hypostatic acid, you can go for a month without changing a reservoir. I know people who have 30-day reservoirs that are as clean as ever. Their tubes don't get clogged as much. And so there's definitely some products that I would have died for 20 years ago that are coming out now that are helping with these minor pitfalls. But it's just keeping things clean. Like you said earlier, cleaning up the bottom leaves. It helps the airflow. It takes out humidity. Humidity is an issue. It can get too high very quickly. You take out some leaves, do a minor leaf pull, even on the bottoms, your humidity is going to jump down 5 percentage points overnight. It's beautiful. So
Sure.
Keeping the leaves off the bottom. Don't give the bugs a place to fester, to grow. Be in your room every day, every night. Look around. Your eyes are your best friend. Your senses are your best friend. Your nose, your ears. But cleanliness, really from day one, cleanliness is your number one friend when it comes to a garden, even in an organic soil garden. Just keep it clean. Just keep it running right. Take notes. When you apply things, take notes of those days. When notes are so good to reference. I keep calendars on the wall. I have calendars like with month after month straight down, so I can very easily calculate things out, whether it's cloning dates or harvest dates. I write notes. I'm spraying sulfur this day. I know to follow up 3 days later with another hit. Data is good. I love data. And so you can't keep enough data, you can't keep enough notes, and just keeping the cleanest garden, to me, is the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's really interesting that we are almost rediscovering certain things, and that they're being implemented into cultivation now. So, like, for instance, with that hypochlorous acid, right? It is, it goes through just a process of electrolysis where you're just adding something to plain water like potassium chloride or sodium chloride, and then you're just applying electricity to that water, and through that electricity you're stripping apart the two different constituents and recombining them into this now clean, non-toxic, chlorine liquid basically that you can apply to your plants, and it's not sodium hypochlorite like what you would find in bleach, where it's going to actually cause issues with the plant by adding these sodium atoms, especially if you're using potassium chloride as your base. And it's something that we had the ability to do for, over 100 years, but we just never thought to apply it in this manner. And so when I really love the fact that you are an old school grower, but that you are excited about these new products because you see the usefulness in their application. Where I do feel as though there are a lot of older growers who tend to be stuck in their ways, and sometimes that if it's not broke, don't fix it, and I get that. But also always being open to these new ideas, new concepts, and new methodologies, I feel like it's how we as humans continue to learn and grow and better ourselves. So I really like that you brought that up as
Yep.
exactly. I really like that you brought that up as something that you were excited about, seeing it come into use and seeing the efficacy of it. It's a perfect example of that. With all of this information that you have as well, all of this knowledge, what would be some advice that you would give to new growers?
Well, new growers have so many wonderful resources. YouTube, YouTube is so awesome. Just dive in, give it a try. It's so safe now. You don't have to worry about the legality of it. I mean, depending on what state you're in, I think there are 15 states still that have draconian laws, but it's getting there. Every year we're pushing closer to total legalization in the whole country. So there's just so many less worries. I'd say absolutely go for it. I would definitely use YouTube for resources. There are just so many videos, from guys like me that just love to help and share information. There used to be a lot of stuck-up growers out there. There really were a lot of jerks that didn't want to spread the love, and they were holding on to their little secret. And the one thing good about things going on in society now in this cannabis movement and being so out there is it's very open source now, and I love that. I don't want to hold on to I want to spread the love and teach everyone that needs or wants to know it what I know, and then they can come back and teach me something, because I am only so smart as I know how much I don't know. Okay, I know a lot about horticulture and about cannabis in general, but I know there's a shit ton I don't know, and I want to know more. And so I am open-minded enough to know that there are not only new products that can give me better results than I've had before if I have an open mind to try them, but there's also people that maybe have been growing for only a few years but have had a different path that can show me something that I haven't experienced before. And so I have a very open mind, and I just want to produce the best, tastiest, most effective cannabis I can produce. And I know I'm not the best at it. No one is the best at it. There's always someone that knows more, and so I have a very open mind about that. And so I think that a beginner grower has so many wonderful resources, but just to go ahead and just do it. Don't put it off. Just give it a try. Even one little plant. If you have a friend with cuttings, I would suggest maybe starting there, because it's just so easy to know you have a genetic. And for those that don't know, clones are a genetic duplicate of the host plant. So if the person is having good results with this one plant, if you take a clone from them, or they give you a rooted clone, preferably a rooted clone you would get, and put it in your system, then the chances of success are astronomically high, as opposed to starting with a seed and you have other things, sexing the seed, and even though it's probably a female, that still could be a male, and then yada yada is the right phenos, and writing the different phenos and keeping a mom of all those phenos in case which one is the best, and just don't even deal with that. Get a good cutting from a friend, and if you're in a state that it's legal, go to a store and even buy a cutting if you need to, if you don't have a friend that has one, and start that way, and start with a little system, whether it's soil, cocoa, or hydroponic. All three are great to start. If you really want it easiest, pop it in a thing of ocean forest, Fox Farm soil, and just watch it grow, and just give it water. You don't need to do anything else, and just watch it. That could be your first foray into it, because it really requires nothing but water and a little sunlight in your windowsill. But there's so many ways to take it and advance it from there. Just like I said, the YouTube videos and the resources out there I'm envious of those resources, considering what I had when I started. So I say just reach out there, but don't put it off. Dive in. It's an amazing venture.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. Don't put it off anymore. Just if you have seeds, get that seed wet. If you have a ability to get a clone, I definitely agree. I suggest clones all the way for a first time grower. They make your life really easy right off the bat. Well, Drew,
Yes.
this was an amazing conversation, and I think that about wraps it up for some of the main questions there. But I do always like to ask a couple little wrap-up questions just to kind of round out the whole show.
Sure, man.
And you've smoked for a long time, so you probably have experienced a lot of different strains and cultivars. So since you are a grower with this much experience, I'm going to break this question up into two parts. What was your favorite strain to grow of all time? I feel like I might have a little inkling of an idea of what you might say, considering what you said earlier about the AK-47 being sort of your bread and butter. But if that's not it, I am all for hearing it. And then what was your favorite to smoke?
Okay. Very good questions. Okay, yes, you were right. The AK-47 was so special, and let me just say why. For a grower, it was giant arm-sized colas, and as fat as my forearm. And I'm a skinny dude, but still, that's a huge cola. And this is back in the day where people were very much into showing off the size of their colas. And so
Sure.
having a cola that big was a cool thing. Nowadays, it was like, oh, all that stick weight and stem weight, nobody wants a cola that big now. But back in the day, 10, 20, even 30 years ago, that was like, people were like, whoa, when they saw a cola like that. And it wasn't me. I have to give credit where credit's due. It was a strain. I was blessed with one of the best genetics still to this day I've ever gotten. But the smell of that AK, Nick, was what really set it apart. It was one of those buds that when you were at a party or a get-together and you were in the corner of the room and you whipped out your AK nug, everybody did this and looked at your corner. Like within seconds, it was known. It was one of a kind. No other plant smelled like it. Yes, chronic smelled like skunk, but AK had its own, such a unique smell that everybody knew it and everybody wanted it because it was the nastiest, gaseous with a little bit of fruit as well. Everybody loved the AK, and so it was props being able to have that and getting that kind of recognition. And so it was very weighty. I was growing back in the day off of 1,000-watt lights. I was growing 2 pounds plus 2.5 pounds a light all day long. This is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
All day long on that. It cloned in 7 days, 8 days.
Wow.
Both in clone machines and in 1-inch Rockwool with domes. Very mold resistant. It was bug resistant. It fired on all cylinders. What can I say? And then finally the smoke of it was delightful. It was a true hybrid. Mine, I guessed at around 50-50 based on my effects, or the effects on me. I could sleep on it. It was good pain reliever. It was incredibly tasty. And so it was just the best all around for me. Now, since then, with all of these bougie strains coming out, especially in Colorado, and I've got some friends that work at Clone, which have amazing genetics over at Clone, Colorado. Also at Free World Genetics, Sam and Austin, who run that, are two amazing savants. They're badass at what they do. Love their genetics as well. One of my favorites was called Orange Cookie Chem, which was a Free World genetic that was absolutely delightful and white with trichomes, super tasty with that orangey, tangy kind of back tone. Absolutely delicious. Medium yielder, so this is strictly for flavor and effect.
Sure.
I absolutely love that strain. And let's see, I think right now I would have to say this strain called Free Mac, which is actually another one of the Free World genetic strains it was kind of fired on all cylinders, but it was very, very stony, big buds, dense buds. Got a little rot here and there if you didn't really watch your humidity. You want to keep it under 50 if you can. But just fired on all cylinders, easy 2 pounds per light if you were under a Thowie, or if you're with LED, you could get a pound off of a 600, a pound and a half off a 600 watt, maybe even 2 pounds off a 630 watt 4x4 LED light. So an incredible plant, but very, very stony, a little on the indica side. I prefer a little on the indica side because I'm looking for a lot of pain relief. I have a chronic low back pain. that I've had.
For sure.
And the indicas usually help me a little more on the back. So I'd say the Free Mac and the AK were my two favorites. Overall, I do like the diesels as well, New York City and some Sour D. I'm still a fan of those as well. But I love trying new bud. Someone has another strain, I'd love to try it, especially when I'm sober, because I like to give a very good opinion on, the taste, how it tickles my throat, how it tickles my nose with the terpene effect, and then, of course, the effect 10 or 15 minutes later. I'd love to check it out.
For sure. Is the Free Mac sort of their version of the Miracle Alien cookies?
Yes. Yes,
Cool.
I believe it's the Miracle Alien cookies mixed with their Free World Chem, I believe.
Oh, cool. A
they
more
have
chemi Mac.
really
That
solid
sounds
base
great.
chem as well.
Yeah, that sounds
Yes.
awesome.
And the colas were very different. The much bigger colas, because as you know, the Miracle Alien Cookies has very small little nectar buds, but they're small. But the Free Mac is like 3, 4, 5 times the size of colas than the Miracle Alien Cookies. Delicious.
Wow. Nice.
Everything those guys do, honestly, Nick, is great. If anybody has a chance to hook up with Free World Genetics, I highly recommend it.
For sure. Well, if you know them personally and you want to help me get them on the show, I'd love to have them and hear more about their story too.
Dude, absolutely. I guarantee it. Yeah, we'll do it.
Cool. Well, the next question may have already been answered, but feel free to just run with it. Who is your favorite breeder of all time?
Man, old school DJ Short. I hate to keep coming back to my boys, man, but Sam and Austin and Free World Genetics are my favorite.
For sure.
They've been taking care of me for like 5 years, 6 years now. And they're just really cutting edge. They work with you personally. I just really like their personal touch to it. Like I say, I'm friends with both of them, and so it's not like it's on big corporate thing, it's like some online company. I can really talk to them on a personal level and tell them what I'm looking for, and they will sit me down and say, "Hold on, let me put some thought in that. Drew, let me call you back in 30 minutes. Let me call Austin and see what he has to say about it." So honestly, I think it's Free World. I like some of the old school. Like I say, DJ Short did some amazing things for a long time and was really an innovator in the industry. And so, but I'd like to say Sam and Austin with Free World are my favorite guys, just because of what they're doing currently.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a show with DJ Short, and it was a great episode talking about his blueberry and his flow, and it would be great to get more breeders on here to talk about their strains.
Yes. I need to
let's
watch
see.
that episode, Nick.
You should. It was a really good one. That was with our co-host, Gabby Bronstein. He's also known as Gabby Staten Island. He's the guy that brought the sour diesel out from the East Coast to the West Coast. And it was a really fun episode.
Sick.
And so let's see. Last question then, just to wrap it up. What is your most memorable cannabis-related experience?
Cannabis-related experience. Probably my first time to Red Rocks Amphitheater and going to see a show. I think it was Blues Traveler back maybe 20 years ago. They used to come to Red Rocks every 4th of July. And I don't know if everybody knows what Red Rocks is, but it's like the most badass amphitheater in the world maybe, but in the country for sure. It's set between these two massive red sandstone rocks shooting out of the earth, overlooking the city of Denver with this mountain range in front of it as well. And you're rocking with like 8,000 like-minded, amazing people. And the moon, July 4th every year, rises out of the horizon. And, the moon, when it's coming up, is always bigger looking. It's insane. And
That's
you
cool.
see this glow, and everybody in the stand starts to kind of scream while they're watching the glow before the movie even comes up. And I got goosebumps even talking about this right now. And we've got some, killer flower. I'm sure it was AK. Back in the day, if it was 20 years ago, I had a fat bowl of AK, if not a few joints going around and spreading the love with everybody around us. And everybody's starting to scream as the moon is rising, and it's full. And the music's playing, and Blues Traveler was just popping back then too. They're at the top, everybody was grooving to them, and it was just everybody's like hugging everybody and passing around joints. And like I say, I got goosebumps right now thinking about it. But that was quite possibly the best cannabis-related experience, sharing the cannabis that I grew with people around me, complimenting me, always a little pat on the back. I don't like to be too egoistic about this, but it was beautiful, and the sharing and everybody hugging and the moon rising and the music and the red rocks and me being like my first few years living in Colorado after moving from Florida. It was a moment of zen, and cannabis only helped that become that. Without the cannabis, it would have been good, but it brought everything together. Amazing.
That sounds like an epic experience. I'm sure a lot of people have similar experiences, whether it be with music or some sort of event or gathering where they're passing around some flower that they've grown, and the vibe is already nice and high and positive and uplifting, and then you're just sharing that extra experience. It is a little bit egotistic, but it's always so great to get a pat on your back for the flower that you grew that everyone else is enjoying. It's a really great experience. So I wholeheartedly can understand how that feels. Well, man, Drew, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to have to reach out to Jarrett and thank him for pointing you in my direction or me in your direction. I think that, we've touched on some really great subjects today, just like general grow knowledge, IPM knowledge, your experience and your journey through this world as a cannabis person, right? This was a really fun conversation. So thank you so much. I really always like to end these episodes by reminding people that the reason why we have these conversations is because it's so important to get this information out there to people, just to have a real conversation, to talk about cannabis and how we all experience it as both growers and consumers. And getting that information out there to people is the way we grow. And that's, for the namesake of the podcast. So again, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Nick, it was a pleasure. I love the name of your podcast. I think it's beautiful. It's touching. It means a lot. And that is how we progress and move forward, is to talk about the way we grow, and everybody has a little bit different take, and us sharing our stories is how we progress this movement and how we push it forward. So it was a pleasure and an honor to be on your show, and I'm so glad Jarrett introduced us, and I'm going to be diving into all your other episodes and checking them out right away. So look forward to it.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody.